For this final section of the segment of the course on executive politics, we've talked about the presidency, we've talked about the federal bureaucracy. Now we'll talk about briefly Nevada's executive branch. And in doing so, we will be making comparisons and contrasts with the federal executive branch. Okay, so maybe the most important thing to note here is that Nevada, like I believe all other states, has a plural executive branch, right? Remember, at the federal level, right, we only elect one person, the president. That president then names bureaucratic leadership and is the chief executive of that bureaucracy. Not the case at the state level. Here in Nevada, we have a plural executive. We do elect the governor, but we also elect the Attorney General, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of the Treasury, the Lieutenant Governor, and the Comptroller. Why we elect the Comptroller, I don't know, man. That's crazy. The Comptroller is basically the chief accountant for the state, right? They do accounting. What do we, the people, know about who would be a good accountant? And does political party really matter to doing accounting? I have some questions about that, but that's what we do. Why do we do it that way? It's a great way, right, to fragment executive power and divide it up into six different offices. They fight amongst each other. Sometimes they cooperate, right? Mostly they cooperate. So that creates, right, checks and balances, internal checks and balances for the executive branch. There can be conflict between executive officers. That's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Conflict can be productive. Typically, you get that. And look, the primary offices here statewide are the governor, obviously, and the attorney general. Those are the two most powerful statewide offices by far. More powerful, right, is the governor. Somewhat less powerful is the attorney general. But those two sometimes go at it, right, because they're the two top dogs. And they especially go at it when they're of the opposite party. Now, I don't know too much about how Lombardo, a Republican, has gotten along with Aaron Ford, a Democrat. It's pretty early days yet. I haven't heard too much about, serious conflict. But if that were to happen in the next few years, right, it wouldn't be surprising. Pretty typical. Now, what was interesting was that when Brian Sandoval was our governor not so long ago, he was often at loggerheads with Attorney General Adam Laxalt. Right? Same party, right? Both Republican, but Sandoval, kind of a mainstream Republican, establishment Republican, moderate Republican, versus Adam Laxalt, hardcore MAGA warrior, culture war guy, right? Seriously hardcore conservative. Those two couldn't stand each other, and I'm sure they still can't stand each other. They had battles over a sage-grouse environmental protection agreement that Sandoval had reached with the federal government, along with the governors from a number of other southwestern states. And almost as soon as the ink was dry on that deal, Laxalt was litigating against it as Attorney General on behalf of the state of Nevada, right? So the state of Nevada going in two directions at once on this issue. Could Laxalt legitimately do that and defy the governor? Sure, right? Because Laxalt's argument is, I don't serve at the pleasure of the governor. I serve at the pleasure of the people of Nevada. And in my view, this is not good for the people of Nevada. It restricts business development. It restricts the ability to develop Nevada land, although it's often federal land, of course, almost always. And then therefore it's problematic. And then they also had a battle over online gaming. So you do occasionally get it between a governor and attorney general of the same party, but not typically. It's also notable, right, that if you're the attorney general, some say that AG, attorney general, it stands for almost governor, that you probably have aspirations to be top dog in the near future. You probably want to shoot for the governor's mansion next. Definitely the case with Adam Laxalt, right? Definitely, that's exactly what Laxalt was doing, right? He was trying to pose himself as a viable candidate for governor in 2018 as a MAGA warrior. He did run that race against Steve Sisolak in 2018, and he lost. Almost governor. Then he ran for the Senate in 2022 against Cortez Masto, the incumbent, and he lost that as well narrowly. So I don't know. I think his political career here in Nevada is over. He's a bit of a carpetbagger anyway. So I think he's donezo here, near as I can tell. But we'll see. You never know. All right, let's bring it up to date. Let's bring it up to date. Because not so long ago, I believe Democrats controlled all six statewide offices in the executive branch. That changed in 2022. Of course, right, Republicans took the top spot. Lombardo won the governorship against Steve Sisolak, who was running for re-election and failed for the Democrats. A Republican also won the lieutenant governor's office. I don't know that that's a very important office. You're basically waiting in the wings in case the governor is maybe impeached. I don't think that's ever happened here. Or maybe the governor dies or becomes incapacitated. So not a particularly important office, but the Republicans did pick that up. The Democrats did win the attorney general race. Aaron Ford got reelected. Zach Conine got reelected as state treasurer. And golly, I think it's Aguilar got elected as secretary of state against Jim Marchant. Aguilar was the Democrat. That's actually an important office because you run Nevada's elections, among other things. And there was a concern even among some Republicans that Marchant was not a good candidate for Secretary of State. He buys into election conspiracy theories that are not grounded in actual facts or data. He's a MAGA warrior, hardcore. You know, Trump won in 2020. He got robbed. So he's a fantasist. And some thought, even Republicans thought, he would have been a dangerous Secretary of State. So Aguilar wins that. He'll be a more standard and professional Secretary of State for the Democrats. So right between the two parties in 2022, you do get a 50-50 split. 3 Republicans in statewide office, 3 Democrats. Other issues we should note before we move on and finish this up. One is the governor and the other statewide offices are bound by term limits. You can serve a maximum of 2 4-full-year terms. 8 years max, I believe, is the max there. Sometimes it gets tricky, and I don't think it's ever happened here, but you know, if the governor were to die, God forbid, and you become lieutenant governor for the last year or 2 of that term, could you run for re-election twice more? I'm not entirely sure. It's one of those thorny, kind of weedy questions. Hopefully we'll never find out. But generally, 2 terms, 4 years each, 8 years total. Impeachment of the governor or any statewide office requires 2/3 from both houses. I don't believe we've ever impeached a governor here in Nevada. And again, hopefully that won't ever happen. There won't be the need for it. The governor, and I think we talked about this, does not have a line item veto when it comes to the state budget. I would argue that that's a good thing. The governor already has plenty of power when it comes to negotiating the state budget, right? They're the ones who propose the budget initially. The legislature responds and they come to a compromise deal. The last thing the governor needs is additional power over the budget. But in almost all states, the governor has exactly that power. I saw the governor of Wisconsin recently, a Democrat, engaged in some super creative line item vetoes to reshape the state budget. I don't like to see that. That gets a little sketchy. We don't have that problem here in Nevada. The governor also has the unilateral power to name top state officials, basically the state bureaucracy, unlike at the federal level, right, where the president can nominate people to serve in leadership in the bureaucracy, but they need advice and consent from the Senate. Not the case at the state level. Here in Nevada, the governor names these top-level bureaucrats unilaterally. Like the Gaming Control Board, the Gaming Commission, the Public Utilities Commission, and lots of other state bureaucratic leadership jobs, all done by the governor unilaterally. The governor is one of 9 people who serve on a pardon board. I was today years old when I found out that it is the 7 members of the Supreme Court, the Attorney General, and the governor. Majority wins, right? So the governor only gets 1 vote out of 9. Used to be the case until quite recently that if the governor opposed a pardon but was in the minority, that pardon would not happen, effectively giving the governor a veto power over pardons. But because of a ballot measure that was passed in 2020, the governor no longer has that veto power. So it's just straight up majority vote. The governor gets 1 vote. I think in a lot of states, the governor can do that pardon unilaterally, just like the president can at the federal level, right? But not here in Nevada. And I kind of like that. And the governor already has plenty of power. Historically, some Nevada governors have been quite powerful and effective, like the legendary Brian Sandoval. Others, like Jim Gibbons, have been very weak because they were not very competent and were not seen as credible. So that can vary quite a bit depending on the skill set of the governor. Governor Lombardo vetoed 75 bills in 2023. I think we talked about that earlier in the summer. That's a lot. That's a new record. Woohoo! I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. As a political scientist, I would just say it's a thing. Empirically, it's a thing. Pretty interesting. I think a few of those ended up passing as parts of other bills later on, but only a few. And I don't think any of them were overridden. That's too hard to do, right? 2/3 in both chambers. Good luck with that. So, Lombardo has asserted his legitimate powers to veto legislation. Also worth noting, he also signed more than 500 bills into law. I think it was 536 in 2023. And he called, 2 special sessions. We've talked about that. I think, and he called them right after the initial biennial session was over in, I believe, the month of June. He called them consecutively right away, so they didn't have to leave Carson City. I think one of them was to pass an important budget bill that hadn't been passed in the regular session, got that done. And then the other one, of course, was to come up with an incentives package to lower the Oakland A's here as a major league professional baseball franchise. That also got done, although, as I think I've noted, it's not a sure thing that the A's are coming here. There's some other hurdles to overcome. We'll see. But the legislature and the governor have done what they need to do to make that happen.